Hello, welcome everyone.
Hey,
Um,
folks.
okay, thank you for joining us and welcome. Um, as you know, this is an important conversation. We're looking at the contingency plan in light of the shutdown to have a discussion, a Q&A. We are incredibly fortunate to have Kurt Rausch from the National Park Service with us. Thank you for being here, Kurt.
Sure.
Um, Over the past year, there's been a lot of transition and a lot of change. Kurt has been a very steady, reliable partner for our community and for our association. He's been a lifeline, providing clear information, timely support, and genuinely collaborating with our association and with our outfitters. So we're grateful not just for the work, but also for the commitment and the care that he shows to our industry. So um, again, thank you so much. I also want to extend gratitude. Aaron is like starting his second month with America Outdoors. So those of you who don't know Aaron, Aaron Lieberman is new to our association, but certainly not new. Longstanding in the outfitting community as well as the association side. He's coming to us from IOGA as the executive director there. But it feels like you've been here forever because it's just the commitment to what needs to be done and the support for the outfitters is clearly there. And I know you're coming into a great team. I have John Simon here too. John Simon has been tremendously supportive in the work that we do. David Brown has been amazing as always in helping. And then we have Kim in the office and of course myself. So the team has been hard at work at all of this. So thank you all. And thank you all for participating. Everything that's going on, it makes light work when everybody's a part of that team. So that being said, again, gratitude for being here and taking part. Aaron, I am going to turn it over to you to start this discussion.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Kurt, again. It's never an easy job that you have. Now it's particularly, you know, there's a lot of new trials introduced with this, I know. But I really appreciate you taking time to chat with us and reaching out to us. I think a good way to start, if you're willing, would just be if you'd be willing to provide folks sort of framing out the discussion here, maybe with just an overview from your perspective of the NPS contingency plan itself, as well as sort of the direction or the process for closures. Um, Sort of that overview that we had the other day when I was on with you. And then from there, maybe we could open it up to some questions from folks. So leaving, as much time as we can maybe for some of those questions. But does that sound all right to you, Kurt?
That works. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll let you take it away.
All right, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay. It's I don't have a full screen of everybody that's on, but just to introduce myself, I'm Kurt Rausch. I'm the Chief of Commercial Services for the National Park Service. So I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, and my portfolio, I sit within the business services group within the Park Service. My boss is Nicole Woody, who's the Acting Associate Director for Business Services, who reports up to the director. My role is managing commercial use authorizations. Many of you may hold CUAs, concession contracts, which are much longer term, larger contractual obligation, and then leases. And we lease buildings and lands for various purposes when they're access to the government. So that's kind of my portfolio. And so I'm happy to talk a little bit about the furlough, the government shutdown, and what that might mean and how we're kind of managing it. So as you all are, I'm fully aware, we have a lapse in appropriations that occurred as of midnight the night before last, which caused the entire federal government to shut down. And this is a unique one as compared to the last one that people may have gone through, which I think was in I think 2018, that went for about a month long. And that was actually just a partial shutdown. This is actually a full shutdown. So a number of more facilities and agencies are affected than was that last one. But Park Service was affected the last time as well. The furlough means that in general, except for essential activities, uh, most of Park Service staff are furloughed. They're not allowed to work at this point in time, and because there's no money to pay for them. There are several special cases that exist. There are both accepted employees. These are employees that are working but not getting paid at this point in time, and they may include law enforcement and specific service categories. I think that the total number of people, as I saw it, and I think it's referenced perhaps in the contingency plan, is that, it's supposed to be a couple dozen federal employees in the Washington office, and then kind of trickles down from there at the regional and Washington park level. I think at the regional level, it's supposed to be about a dozen people, and then less so below that. So I'm currently what's called an accepted employee, and that means that I'm working as necessary to support the furlough operations, and I'm actually on call. So when there's nothing specific that I'm responsible for, I'm supposed to be actually not working. So the posture of the Park Service and the department overall, as I understand it, is that we're attempting to maintain as many things open as possible, and so by and large, many park operations are ongoing or the parks are open. The primary condition is that if there's a swing gate that would be closed at night to prevent access to a particular area, those areas or parks are officially closed. And that's kind of the starting point. And then beyond that, everything is presumed open unless, and I'm not an expert on all of this, but unless there's a natural resource or a cultural resource that needs to be protected and there are inadequate resources to do that. In those sorts of cases, the park superintendent is responsible for providing information on what the intended closures are to be. And this is refined a little since yesterday. And they are supposed to provide that information upwards to the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Interior, and there's a process by which they do that to provide that information before they close those operations. And so that may be occurring in real time. The intent is to provide that information upwards as quickly as possible and get awareness by the department, specifically the Assistant Secretary, and authorization to close those operations. So it could be, for example, an area that has particular cultural resources that are very sensitive, and so not having those facilities or having those facilities open without the ability to have adequate staff to kind of monitor that activity, whether it be a historic building or an archaeological site, might be something that may be an area that would be closed. And I could think of, for example, and I don't know if this is the case, but if there was a tour that was happening at Mesa Verde, and it was normally tours that would be led by a ranger down into a particular cliff dwelling area, that area might be closed because of the culturally significant resources there and the ability to manage those, whereas other parts of the park may be open. And I'm giving that as an example, not necessarily as a specific one that I know the specifics of. So that's how the accessibility is occurring. In order for concessioners or CUAs to operate, however, there is a requirement that there's an agreement that is filled out, and there's template agreements that all parks have, and they're supposed to be connecting with CUA holders and concessioners to get this document signed. And the document basically indemnifies, if you will, not specifically an indemnification, but speaks to the fact that park resources aren't available as they would normally be, and that the operations are kind of operating at their own risk and with an awareness of the limited resources that the Park Service may have. There are, other special cases, conversations that you may be having with some of your constituents around access for air flights and that sort of stuff. And again, all of that is really being managed at the park level. So I wouldn't be able to speak to a specific instance of whether, a particular air taxi services is allowed to access here, or a particular area of a park is allowed to access there. That is, again, information that's or being addressed at the park level, and then ultimately getting approved if there's a closure need at the assistant secretariat level before it happens. I think that's really the primary elements of what's going on. So, access and trying to maintain open facilities is kind of the starting point. Facilities that would normally be closed, particularly in off hours with a swing gate, are kind of the starting point for them, is that they're closed. Otherwise, it's a decision by the park superintendent based on the protection of resources or the staff resources to manage that, and that it needs to be approved by the assistant secretary before there's an action to close those. And then there's a form that you should be getting filled out, and that's going into a master file that's present in the Washington office that identifies that you've acknowledged the closure status or the reduced resources at the park. The only other thing I will mention is that there is the ability for the Park Service to receive donations, and those there are donation forms. So we do have situations where states may be donating, communities may be making donations, or individual operators may be making donations. That can be to keep an area open by providing staff resources or utility payments or other things to kind of make sure that those facilities are staying open. We see that particularly in cases where there may be a front country operator, a large hotel operator, or something like that, and they want to try to maintain the hotel operations. And because we don't have the funds to actually pay things like utilities at this point in time, there would be maybe a decision that they would pay utility bills in order to keep the facilities open. So I'll stop there. That was a fair amount of information. Hopefully it was clear. I'm not the absolute expert on all policy and procedure associated with this. I don't have any insight, for example, into what that list of accessible facilities and non-accessible facilities looks like, or what the specifics around the justifications for those are. So I wouldn't be able to answer those sorts of questions, but I'm happy to try to answer questions that I can. And then for those questions that I can't, I can jot them down, or Aaron can provide them to me, and I can see if I can get you answers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kurt. And I wrote down some questions when we chatted the other day, but before I go into anything, it's pretty open here. Would anybody that's on the call like to? Yep. Michael Cohen.
Hi, Kurt. Thank you so much for taking the call with America Outdoors. We're so grateful for your continued support and helping America Outdoors and all of us outfitters get through this challenging time. We need your partnership with us. Please keep coming to conference. And I just wanted to get on the line here too. I did get authorization at my Channel Islands National Park to work to continue to provide services. They are having some limited closures, but because of the situation, we're allowed to run. And so we're grateful for that. I had the question on whether you see the ruling changing with the current situation going forward. And I just want to comment here before I get off the air. It's really important that the message goes back, that the perception to all the United States is that the national parks are closed. And messaging from superintendents or parks to help us get through this really does help. I know Ethan at Channel Islands is being helpful. Although Visitor Center is closed, Park Islands are still open. So I just wanted to reiterate to you that the public thinks the parks are closed. It's one of the first news items that come up, and that's actually in a lot of ways not the case. So if you could send messages back to powers that be to let, authorized messaging from park be really clear that people can still visit park, because it does hurt, it hurts small business, it hurts outfitters and guides and tour operators when the perception is that the park is closed. So that's my comment. And again, thank you so much for coming out. And the first part of the question was, do you see any changes coming down?
Yeah, I will definitely take that message relative to closure and how that's being messaged. That's obviously outside my kind of wheelhouse these days on how the department is kind of providing that information. I did even notice yesterday, I went to a park unit that I had heard was closed in a call yesterday, and it was because the gate is normally closed at nighttime. It was actually hard to find any information relative there was an opening or a closure. So, but I think there's a lot of work being done to kind of spin this up pretty quickly. These things, happen fairly fast, and there's not a lot of time for the Park Service to actually be allowed to do anything in advance. It kind of comes all at once, and so there may be, work being done on that front to kind of figure that out. So I'll take that message forward. I don't have any information on whether things are going to change or not. I know there was there were conversations yesterday early on about the process of the closure activity and how the approval was going to be working. And so there was some things even in real time yesterday where parks were starting to get better understanding of what type of information they had to forward up, or whether they had the authority to close and then get approval. And I think that was clarified yesterday during the day. So again, as I suggested, my understanding is that prior to a closure of something that would not otherwise be normally closed because of a gate ability for a gate closure, is that it's moving up and hopefully fairly quickly to the Assistant Secretary's office. Obviously, if there's an area that a park is concerned about closing, we also don't want to have an area open and not have the capacity to kind of protect that area, because it could be a resource damage, that sort of stuff. So I suspect, that's probably being ironed out today, and probably by tomorrow, things should become pretty consistent. I don't know if the furlough goes on for a period of time, whether that might change things. One of the things, well, actually, I guess I could speak to the fact that there are certain funding sources that exist. So I mentioned donor sources. There's also a thing called the federal, and John can help me if I get this wrong, Federal Lands Enhancement.
Recreation Enhancement Act.
Right, Recreation Enhancement Act. Thank you, John. Which is a act from which we collect entrance fees, and those funds are available at a certain level to help to support staffing in parks. So some of the people that are currently operating in parks are using those funds to do basic visitor services, so maintaining restrooms, basic maintenance responsibilities, utilities, that sort of stuff. At some point in time, if the furlough were to continue for an extended period and there weren't donor dollars, those funds may ultimately end for a particular park and not be further available. And that could change the posture of whether the park is open, because if they don't have the staff to do some of those basic functions, it may limit their ability to do activities even further. But and that may change based on the specifics of a particular location. I think John and Aaron were on a call yesterday. What I think I heard one of the concessioners at Statue of Liberty say, for example, was that there was funding available that would get them through the weekend, or maybe till Tuesday of next week, after which, if other fund sources weren't available, things would probably start to close down, because that fund source would have been exhausted at that point in time. So there could be a change over time. So really good question. And sorry, I kind of backed away from my original statement on that. And that would be the reason for that. In addition to a policy change that might occur within the agency, which I can't speak to. Great question.
I do have a couple of follow-ups, and I'm going to hold them for now and go on to Carrie. I think your hand was up, and then John.
Thanks, Aaron.
First, let me introduce myself. My name's Carrie Romero. I'm the Executive Director of the New Mexico Council of Outfitters and Guides. I really appreciate Aaron inviting me to participate. And Kurt, I really appreciate you being here to answer our questions. We're a trade association that represents the outfitting industry in the state of New Mexico. Is there a process for us to push back against a specific closure? And I'll give you an example. So in New Mexico, we have a national preserve that's run by the Park Service. It's called the Valles Caldera. They issue hunting permits on the Valles Caldera. Those hunts they're set to begin taking place on October 11th. And the hunters who have those tags have been told that those hunts will no longer take place. The Valles Caldera is gated. So you answered one of my questions there. I mean, they've shut the gate, so it's essentially closed. Although it says on the website that the National Park Service website that they're still open to pedestrian, but they're canceling the hunts. So in my head, if they're still allowing pedestrians to walk in to the preserve, why would they not allow that same walk-in accessibility for the hunting public? And in addition to that, the way that have always historically worked on the preserve is the hunter receives a gate code, an access code, so they can access those gates, outside of the regular 8 to 5 opening and closing of the gate. Yet now they're being told under the government shutdown, they won't have access to the gate codes. So why wouldn't they allow the gate code access still? No one needs to be there to monitor that. So that's the example. And my question is there a process for us to push back? Because all of those employees that work on that preserve are currently furloughed.
Yeah, I don't have any knowledge of a specific process. Certainly you could kind of reach out to your constituencies, and they may be able to contact the department directly, or seek to put a letter in or a message into the director, but there's no specific process for doing that. And I will see if there is such a thing and let Aaron know, and then he could let you know. I don't want to really I prefer not to opine about, what the park's theory behind that is. I mean, if somebody were to ask, why do you think that's happening? I would say, even though the gate may be accessible because of the hunt, perhaps there's a need for checking permit tags, and they don't have the staff to do that. And so that's the impact, that it would be unrestricted hunting and without any ability to regulate it. So I'm not I've done a little hunting, but I'm not a big game hunter. So I don't know that much about how the tagging is done in that particular park unit. So, but that'd be my guess on where they were going on that, but I really don't know. But I will try to get Aaron some information on if there's concerns, how do we voice those concerns upwards.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great, Kurt. Maybe just a really brief follow-up on that before going to you, John. My understanding, and I think you spoke to this already, is that the determination as to whether or not CUA or other operations may continue will similar to any closure be made on the park basis by the superintendent, and then be sent on to the assistant secretary for quote unquote rapid review, but that they may actually close those in advance and then have the assistant secretary review that action ex post facto. Is that correct?
Well, my understanding is that unless there's a basis for making that closure decision in advance of getting the approval, and that would be and perhaps in this particular case, and I can't speak to a specific park and exactly how it's set up, because there is a normally closed gate. Maybe that was the presumption in this particular case, that it fell into that category where it is not a traditionally accessible area, and therefore the decision was made. However, if it is normally an accessible area, and this is a kind of an interesting one, so it's hard for me certainly to adjudicate whether that would be the case or not. Those are supposed to go to the assistant secretary prior to closure. is the current understanding. And that was something that yesterday was still being worked out. I think there had been some need for communicating exactly what that process was, and was there the ability to proactively close before the assistant secretary's review. And I think that it got clarified after we had our call yesterday that it's supposed to go to the assistant secretary before the closure and not proactively, even though there may be a compelling reason to do so.
Right. I think the language is like
would be a great example.
Safety or resource protection was like the grouping language for like why they may do it in advance. Right. Okay. I could keep on going on that, but I'm gonna pass it over to John because he probably has a smarter question than me. But I might come back to that one. Thank you.
No, and actually not even a question. Wanted to come back to the concern and issue that Mike raised earlier, which is a great one. And just wanted to point out that there is language in the Park Services contingency plan that says that except for emergency communications, park websites and most social media are not going to be maintained, which if true seems it will not be very helpful to addressing the concern that Mike raised. But Kurt, definitely very much appreciate your willingness to take that back.
Yeah, I think that is the case. That would be considered a government function. And maintaining websites is certainly something that would not under normal circumstances be probably accepted activity, except I think there was some work done initially to put up a general banner on the Park Services website. But again, a little bit out of my area of expertise on exactly how they're managing the comms on this.
Okay. Does anybody else in the group here on or off video have a question you'd like to run by Kurt? I otherwise have a number of them, but I'd like to give the opportunity for other folks to ask them first.
I did, if nobody else has a question, I did remember something that I didn't mention that came up yesterday. You may have actually asked the question, Aaron, which is probably worth mentioning. And that is, how is the CUA application and permitting process happening or affected by the furlough? And by and large, unless there's a very unusual circumstance, the individuals that would typically be doing that work are furloughed and unable to do that activity. And so there won't be any CUAs, new CUAs being issued during this period. I'm sure that the parks will be accommodating, once they're back, trying to catch up on any CUAs that would have been issued during this period. So, that may be challenging for them. And so hopefully people can be sympathetic to the fact that it may be difficult for them to get behind that and catch up, but they certainly will do so. And sort of the online system, I think, is still up at this point in time, but ultimately the ability for us and our contractors to support that online system ultimately could become a problem as well. And so even though it may be able to accept applications now, and I honestly don't know if it does or not at this point, there may be a point in time when something happens where it would no longer be supported. Also, I'm not sure if pay.gov, which is a system for which payment is happening through that system, is actually online and functioning, because that's run through, a separate part of the administration, not necessarily in the Department of Interior. And I'm not sure if that's being supported or not. So you may run into trouble with that. I think my advice yesterday, though, was if you have payments, or you certainly can try to do the application, and if it goes through, that's great. It won't probably get approved because there's a superintendent's approval, and this would not be an activity that would be done during furlough. So you could process the application perhaps, but you probably won't get your permit back. And then on any kind of fees that might be occurring, my recommendation is to attempt to pay the fees. If you're on some sort of payment program where they would be due now, I would try to do everything you can to meet those deadlines. You may not get answers on the other end, but if there is a payment that is due, I would try to submit them. If they don't get submitted, I would just document that very well. I mean, the Park Service will certainly be completely understanding if something doesn't get processed because we weren't here to process it. The same is true some of your constituents may be concessioners and not CUA holders. If there's a concession contract that is out for with a prospectus out and the offers are due, my recommendation would be to continue to follow whatever that timeline is and not assume that it's been delayed, and submit. There may not be people to accept it, but document the heck out of the fact that you submitted, and keep your FedEx receipts. Take a picture of that when it shows that it's been delivered and time checked, just so that you have that information in the event that we come back and we ask for that, which we would want to do because we would still want them to be timely. So apologies for not remembering to talk about that aspect of things.
No, that's fine. Before I jump into a follow-up question, does anybody want to feel free to interrupt me? I suppose I'll say unmute yourself. You should be able to do that. Quick follow-up on the, I suppose, New Mexico question, but really is part and parcel of the broader question. In instances where a particular park, and I think this is probably just a follow-up thing that you already mentioned, but in instances where something has been closed, where access is blocked, would the appropriate first point of contact for a request for reconsideration or for providing additional information be the superintendent, or insofar as they would be the person making the decision, would it be the assistant secretary? I think you said that this is something that you might follow up on. It doesn't seem, I looked around, it doesn't seem like there's any actual explicit procedure enumerated, but do you have any, I suppose maybe a better question is, short of finding any sort of formal documentation on your end, do you have any suggestion for who the best point of contact would be in these instances where it is time sensitive?
Yeah, I definitely would support trying to reach out locally first. So going to the park superintendent. Now, I'm not sure Vice Caldera.
Will they be furloughed? Will they be available?
By and large, now Vice Caldera is an interesting park unit. I don't know if it's part of a larger unit and how that's administered. I know it's a big park, but it also doesn't have a lot in it. So they may be associated with another park unit. The likelihood is that for larger parks, at minimum, the superintendent is not a furloughed employee unless the entire park unit, and it's a small unit, is completely shut down. So then I can't speak to Vice Caldera. So I would start there. Second place you could go to is the regional director. The regional director is definitely there. And whether they're going to be seeing the email is a question mark, but you could certainly go to the regional director. And beyond that, I don't know. There's probably a general director's email box, but I'm not really sure what that looks like. And then, the challenge too is once you're getting to the director's office or the assistant secretary's office, I'm not sure that what their process for getting input is at this point in time. I imagine there's probably a lot of stuff coming over the fantail for them, and they're probably kind of managing as best they can. So, but certainly you could try to do that. Or, as I mentioned, and I wouldn't recommend this as your first stop, but you could certainly go to your delegate and ask the question of the delegate, and the delegate may have more direct access to the secretary's office or the assistant secretary's office. Our secretary is a former governor, so they certainly have. He has a particular interest in making sure he's supporting his fellow ex-governors. So.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Again, anybody feel free to interrupt me. Going back to, staying in the West for a second, but say on the Grand Canyon, I am speaking specifically about the Grand Canyon, but we have a number of folks who are basically not outfitters, but private outfitting, right? So provide rental and those types of services. Do you have any sense in terms of the donation structure, whether it would be possible, and if so, what the approach would be for providing donations specific to, say, the checkers that are required to allow people to launch at Lee's Ferry? Or is that I'm sure that this has come up in the past. Do you have any recollection of what the avenues may be for doing something there?
I think that kind of restating the question, you're really asking, can there be directed donations to a particular function such as
To a
that?
particular function to allow access for something that is otherwise closed due to the cessation of that function or employee status. Yeah, employee role.
I don't know how closely it breaks down. My recommendation would be if somebody is interested, they should contact the park, and the park will be able to give that information. I don't have the donor or the donor process details pulled up, so I can't really answer that question. I did mention that utilities was an example. I just don't know how granular that ability to direct donations goes. It would see, so I don't want to speak out of turn. It seems like that might be a functional area that might be a good way to be able to direct donations, because it is kind of capture a large portion. It would also, I think, impact positively the CUA community, I would imagine, as well, because they may be putting it at the same location. So I would definitely reach out to the park superintendent. They should be able to answer that immediately.
Okay.
While you're asking your next question, I'll see if I have anything in the documentation I have that kind of answers that question.
That'd be great. Back on this, another follow-up one, but on, you were speaking to Floria and how Floria balances could be used to sustain certain services. And I think I may have asked you this question the other day, but just in case you happen to find any information in the meantime, if I did and you didn't have the answer, I apologize in advance, but do you know if there's any mechanism whereby folks, say operators, could be notified or otherwise track the balances for their respective parks to get some sense of when or how they might be depleted if they are using those funds to sustain services?
Yeah, I don't believe that is information that we typically provide publicly, and I don't think we'll be doing it during this period. I think it's a very, there's definitely a tracking process that's occurring, because that is information that the Washington office needs to have, but it's not information we would generally share.
Okay.
And certainly if you're interested in getting that information shared, you could reach out to the Assistant Secretary's office and maybe they would make a decision to allow it. But it's not something that we normally have posted on a real-time basis. So that's a pretty complicated stuff. There's like lots of ins and outs happening at any given time these days. So.
Yeah, and that question really comes back to like concerns about communication and being able to communicate to clients and to the public effectively, right? So if you do, I haven't been notified personally of a specific instance where an operator say knows that FLREA funds are being used to sustain services, but that they may run out. I guess the ultimate concern would be if FLREA funds are being used to that end, and those funds were to be depleted in a certain time frame, and appropriations remain suspended, then they would not be able to anticipate and communicate out to potential clients that, this is no longer going to be a thing. So it's just being able to anticipate what the next call might be about, what those other non-barking problem dogs are.
I'll note it down and bring it forward. I think the answer is probably going to be no, that information is not available. Not only is it how much is available, but then there may be all kinds of conditions around whether the entirety of the funds are available or whether some are being held or not fully expended because they can't be legally or otherwise. I mean, there could be a lot of other reasons why just having a number sitting there and then saying, well, there looks like there's money there would have to, there could be 25 footnotes associated with that, which may be part of the challenge. So I also not quite sure how, there's quite a bit of, imagine trying to understand what a day-to-day budget of FLREA looks like. And so I'm sure there's some sensitivity to how accurate is that information at any given time in order to post it, et cetera. But I'm happy to take that information forward.
Another question that I am confident that I asked you the other day, but I'm going to ask you again just in case you happen to have an answer this time around. But do you have any updated sense of whether or not there is any mechanism or plan since yesterday for like make good or carry forward of lost days, lost use days for operators that were forced to suspend trips? And sort of similar question that is definitely outside your wheelhouse for private launches.
Yeah, I think my answer from yesterday is
The
still
same.
stands, and that is I don't know.
Yep.
And I think it may be dependent upon the specifics of the situation. So I'm not an expert in carrying capacity, as I indicated yesterday. The
Yep.
potential for there to be the ability to absorb additional trips in one particular park environment may not be the same in another park environment. So there could be a carrying capacity that's very limited to X number of trips on, say, a river on a daily basis. And we can't double that up. Or try to absorb those lost days at another point in time, because that would be outside the carrying capacity. On the other hand, there could be environments where that's a more fluid and flexible environment. Again, I'm not a natural resource scientist, so I can't and don't have a lot of experience with exactly what that looks like to be able to answer that definitively. And again, I think that's a great conversation to take up with your superintendent and their staff, particularly when they get back.
Yep. Okay, I'll pause for a second, see if anybody else wants to jump in.
I will mention one thing there for concession contracts. Excuse me. There is an ability to do what we call lengthening the term of the contract, and the ability to do that is based on a variety of circumstances, including kind of natural events, things outside the control of the concessioner. I think the language, and if not the regulation in the preamble, may even speak to things like administrative closures for extended periods of time. That is not something that was anticipated for weeks or even a month or two. This was intended for large closures, for example, Northrim, Grand Canyon, likely to be closed for over a year before any services that are substantial are back in there for the incumbent concessioner to use. And that was really what it was anticipated for, not for shorter term closure. So it's not like we're going to add a month to your contract because you were closed for a month, in the middle of November or whatever. So.
Right. Let's see here. I do have other questions that I asked you yesterday. I don't know how fair it is to ask you those again, just for the additional audience. I could ask, like, how dare you not know the answers to the questions I have? But there's not a great answer to that one either.
I still have no information on APA and its applicability. So if that's one of them, unfortunately, yes, I don't. I did speak to our solicitors about that, and they said that they would look into it, but I haven't gotten any information from them on it.
Okay. Well, Karen, do you have any additional questions written down?
I don't. So.
Okay. Does anybody else in here have any questions or comments, things you'd like to say before we let Kurt get back to his day?
I'll just say, Kurt, stay strong, brother. Like, this is not your fault, and it totally sucks. And it's just bad. It's just bad for everyone. It's bad for business. It's bad for the park. It's bad for the country. So whatever you can do to help us from your side there in Wausau, we really would appreciate it, because I know we still are working hard to connect people with nature in our parks. And that's our goal. And I think we're going to make it through this time. And I would just thank you for staying strong with us with America Outdoors.
Yeah, no problem.
Amen.
Thank you for that. We appreciate all that you're doing. We know this is a really complex and challenging situation for you. You know, the likelihood is that I'll get paid, and it's a lot more difficult if you don't have clients. So I certainly appreciate the impact that it has to you directly. And yeah, I agree. These are challenging times. It's a challenging thing to have to go through. So appreciate your support of us. You know, if questions come up, Aaron, I will try to get answers to these and then feed them back to you. But certainly I'm, you know, on call. I'm going to be answering email and, you know, picking up the phone if things come up. So if you or any of your constituents have any questions that I can help with, or you think that I might be able to answer, feel free to pass them forward and I'll try to get you answers. But yeah, thank you very much for all you all are doing. And I look forward to perhaps seeing you out in, I guess, Salt Lake, perhaps, or maybe
I hope
before.
so.
Salt Lake for sure.
Yes.
All right.
Well, I
Thank
mean,
you
if
for all you're
we're still in a
doing.
shutdown in December, then we've got much bigger problems.
Oh, true
But,
that.
yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
it would be more a function
we'll see
of
it.
whether
We'll see it
I'm
in Salt Lake. I'm
authorized to
gonna be
travel or not.
optimistic about it. But I'd like to echo Mr. Cohen there. Like, we really appreciate you. You're a great partner, and it's not lost on us. So thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks to everybody for taking time out of your day to jump in here. If you do have questions that either we didn't get a chance to cover or that I bungled, please send them along to me and I'll send them along to Kurt, and then I'll just create an automated reminder to email you every hour until you lose your mind, and we get those answers back. So, but if you do have questions, send them along to me, and I'll connect with you, Kurt, and see if we can get some answers for you. Okay. Appreciate you all.
Thank you
Thank you so
all.
much.
Thanks, Kurt.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.